So one of the keys with getting dwell time on a particular shot is being loose with your arm. If you're going to be hitting a speed up, it's good to use your wrist. And if you're looser, you'll be able to swing faster and actually keep that paddle in contact with the ball a little bit longer. If you're more rigid, it'll lend itself to more of a popping type of motion, and that's a lot tougher to do if you're going to try to generate spin. There's different factors that influence dwell time, but remember that they come from the paddle and they also come from the player. All right, thank you for tuning in to another one of my shows. We are going to talk about dwell time today. So dwell time is a super important topic. It's definitely discussed a lot among players of all levels. I know the pro game is very, very concerned with dwell time and how much dwell time their paddle has. So what dwell time means, just for a brief overview, is how long a ball will rest on the face of the paddle while you're making contact. So a paddle with low dwell time, it's say, here's the paddle, it'll just pop right off. And a paddle with high dwell time, it'll feel like it's sinking into the paddle for a split second or however long you want to call it that. So, there's definitely disadvantages and advantages to having a paddle with a lot of dwell time. So a paddle with a lot of dwell time will definitely help you on resets and dinks and drops because it will have more control for the most part. Not always will this be the case, but I personally feel like a paddle with more dwell time gives me more control because I can kind of maneuver the ball around a little bit more while I'm making contact with the ball. But another thing that people don't realize as it relates to dwell time is that dwell time will actually also come from you in a way. So the way that you hit the ball can impact how long the paddle will be making contact with the ball or how long the ball will be on the paddle. And dwell time is something that's super important as it relates to getting spin on the ball. So if you want to get a lot of spin on the ball, the more time that ball is sort of dwelling on the paddle, the more you'll be able to get spin and create shape on the ball to get the ball up and down in a hurry or to get a lot of slice on the ball. So one of the keys with getting dwell time on a particular shot is being loose with your arm. So the looser that you are, the more easily you'll be able to go like this, especially with your wrist when you're hitting a speed up or a drive. And, they talk about, don't hit the ball with your wrist in pickleball, but that's actually only on soft shots. That's only on drops and dinks. If you're going to be hitting a speed up, it's good to use your wrist. And if you're looser, you'll be able to swing faster and actually keep that paddle in contact with the ball a little bit longer. If you're more rigid, it'll lend itself to more of a popping type of motion, and that's a lot tougher to do if you're going to try to generate spin. And if you want to smooth contact with the ball, being loose is better. So, there's different factors that influence dwell time. But remember that they come from the paddle and they also come from the player. So if you really wanted to hit a ball with a lot of dwell time, you want to be loose and you want to also get more of your power from your legs. So if you're just standing up straight, it's tougher to get a lot of, ball paddle interaction because you're standing there and you're just kind of slapping the ball like this. So if you really use your legs, then you'll be able to get that surface in contact with the ball a little longer, most likely. And that's where dwell time comes from in terms of the player. And then if you're looking for a paddle that has a lot of dwell time, one that can really sink into the ball, normally a thicker paddle will have more dwell time than a thinner paddle, just because there's more time for the ball to rebound in a paddle that is thicker than one that is thinner. So if you see a paddle that's 12 millimeters or 13 millimeters in thickness, and normally this will be advertised when you buy the paddle, it'll tell you how thick it is. 12 to 13 is usually on the thinner side, and then 16, anything above 16 will be what we call, typically a thicker paddle. So also paddles with foam in the core tend to have more dwell time than ones without foam in the core, and typically paddles that have more vibration dampening or a softer core will have more dwell time. So that's something that you should definitely maybe look for. I know there's a lot of players that are trying to figure out, how do I get a paddle that has that dwell time, that sort of hollow sound, so you'll kind of hear it it'll make a thud sound as opposed to like a pop sound. There's two different distinct sounds in pickleball. And the ones that are kind of making that pop sound tend to have a little bit of less dwell time, stiffer core, maybe a Nomex core. Those are kind of going out of style because they have less dwell time. So just to recap that, if you want a paddle that has a lot of dwell time, I know I've said that phrase now 30 times in this podcast, but if you want a paddle that has a lot of control or sinking into the ball, you probably want to look for a paddle that has a raw carbon fiber face, a thicker paddle, so a 16 millimeter paddle instead of a 13 or 14 millimeter paddle, and then one that has a softer core. So what I mean by a softer core, typically that's going to be a core that is a honeycomb polypropylene core surrounded by foam, which tends to be softer than other cores. That's what we call a hybrid core, or just a full foam core can have a little bit more dwell time than a full polypropylene core. Yeah, it's interesting. They talk about the transition from honeycomb polypropylene to foam, but it's actually not that big of a difference. And I'm going to keep this short because it's super nerdy paddle stuff. But honeycomb polypropylene is a type of plastic, and then there's this new type of foam that people are using. For example, people are using EVA foam, which is ethylene vinyl acetate foam in paddles. And it's funny because polypropylene and foam are not too different. They're very similar. It's just a different type of curing process, and then foam has air bubbles in it, and it can be, you can play around with the densities a little more. Hey guys, James Ignatowich here. Make sure to not get ghosted in the pickleball group chat. Play more. We all know the feeling. You're down to play some pickleball. You send a message to your group chat. A couple people like the message. Are you sure you're going to play the game? You don't really know. Play More is a new pickleball app that does that frustrating part for you. I hate setting up games. I try to make sure somebody else does it every single time. But if I have the Play More app, changes everything for me. So you're going to be playing with players your level. No more 5-0 versus 3-0 matchups. It's going to be all streamlined and super easy. So make sure to check out the Play More app. Try it out on the App Store or use the web version at getplaymore.com. Here's a good thing to talk about because there's been a lot of lobs that have been hit, and people are trying to experiment with, where do I want to target people on lobs? Do I want to go over their backhand side? Do I want to go over their forehand side? Do I want to go over the left side player or the right side player? Or should I just hit most of my offensive lobs cross court? And this is a great question. And I am something of a lobbing specialist in practice. In games, I don't hit a lot of lobs because I'm like, you know what? I got to stick to with what I, really am comfortable with in games. I feel like when I'm practicing, it's a little easier for me to just mess around and hit lobs. And I'm good at it. I've got to start doing it in matches. I just don't do it yet because I don't have the to do it, but I will. So a couple things with my practice lobbing success is that I've had a lot more success lobbing cross court than down the line. And I've said this many times, when you're on offense and you want an aggressive lob, going cross court, not even really concerned too much of, is it going over a forehand or is it going over a backhand? I think the first thing you should be considering when you're lobbing aggressively is just going cross court. There's an extra 4 feet of space there because of the geometry of the court. It's significantly easier to hit that lob and keep it in because there's more space. Down the line versus cross court, if you know geometry, you'll understand cross court's better in that sense. The other thing is you might be asking, okay, well, if there's more space cross court, doesn't that give the opponent more time to then go run and get it? And that is true, okay? That is a trade-off. There is more space, so they should have more time to go get it. But I would say that if you are hitting a lob and making them contact the ball from that far behind the baseline, then it really doesn't matter how much time they have to go get it. If you can get it over their heads and they're hitting a ball from back there, you are winning in that moment. So another thing with offensive lobs, you got to use your legs a lot and you got to get topspin. If you stand up straight, it's almost impossible to get topspin on a lob. You have to get under the ball to impart topspin on the ball. Because if this is the ball, topspin, is it like this? Slice, is it like this? So just remember that. If you're ever not sure what topspin or slice is, topspin means your paddle's going from low to high across the ball. Slice means it's going from high to low across the ball, and that's all you really have to be concerned with. So on a slice, obviously, you're coming from high to low. That means that you don't necessarily have to bend your knees as much because you're coming under the ball naturally without really trying to do so. If you're going for topspin, you have to bend your knees more. So that means if you're trying to hit a topspin lob cross court, get low and use topspin because offensive lobs with slice don't tend to work. They tend to sail out because topspin will bring the ball down, slice will bring the ball in a continuous upward motion for longer. Another thing is if it's windy, slice will be more impacted by the variance in wind. Topspin won't be, because it'll keep the motion of the ball a little tighter if it has more topspin. So those are the keys with the offensive lob. And it's interesting because with the defensive lob, it's a lot different. When I'm on defense and I'm all the way back here, a defensive lob, I'm just going for height, as high as possible, and I'm basically aiming in the middle of the court. So to guarantee that I do not miss the ball wide or long, I'm just going right in the middle, and I'm going as high as possible. So the question is, why am I going as high as possible on a defensive lob? For me, I feel like on a defensive lob, more height is better because it does a couple things. It actually allows the ball to be affected by the variance in wind, and that's actually good when you're on defense, because at that moment you are currently losing the point. That's kind of what defense means. You're on defense, you're in a tough spot. If you throw it high up in the air, the ball will be moved around a lot by the wind, and that can mess up your opponent. The other thing is it confuses the two players that you're playing against, assuming that you're playing doubles. If you're playing singles, I wouldn't recommend a super high defensive lob in the middle of the court, just for clarification. But if you're playing doubles, then it can confuse the two players that you're playing against. They're going to be thinking, should I take this ball? Should he take this ball? Now the wind's moving it. And lastly, I'm not super concerned with the amount of topspin that I'm putting on a defensive lob. I'm really just thinking, get it up there as high as it can possibly go. If there's a little slice on it, there's a little topspin on it, that's great. But mainly I'm just thinking height, middle of the court. Last thing that helps me is it gives me as much time as I need to get back and get into the right position when I'm defending a overhead. Because if I lob it to them, you can be sure the next ball they're hitting is an overhead. So if it's shorter, I have less time to run back and get into a good defensive stance. If it's higher, I have more time. So when you're on defense, remember this. You want to extend the amount of time between you hitting the ball and your opponent hitting the ball. When you're on defense, give yourself as much time as possible to prepare for their next shot. When you're on offense, that's when you want to use more topspin. You want to lean in. You want to compress the distance between you and your opponent and make it so that there's less time between you hitting the ball and them hitting the ball for the most part, because when you're on offense, you want to speed up the pace. So those are the main things as it relates to lobs. Hoping one day that in tournaments I will implement some more lobs. I implement some defensive lobs in tournaments. Offensive lobs, I don't really do it. But if you feel comfortable doing it, I would definitely recommend doing it. Because as long as we're still playing outside, which, obviously there's a lot of indoor courts being made, and I think pickleball probably should go indoors for the most part, but that's a tough topic for another conversation. Then, throw up some offensive lobs. That's all we got, guys. Thanks for watching.